Dear students, welcome to today's session on the software engineering. In today's session in software engineering, we will be discussing about principles of software requirements analysis. This is one of the chapters of your software engineering course in MCA, and even BCA learners will be benefited from this particular discussion on the topic. This is one of the most important topics in software engineering because you will be developing software for given requirements, and if those requirements are not in line, then the software which you develop will be going in a different direction. Software requirements are like details in a map. Suppose you are holding a map and started traveling, and if the detail in that map is having errors, or if the detail itself is wrong, then you will be heading to a different destination altogether. In the process, you are spending your time, your fuel, and cost is associated, so many things. So this particular discussion on the principles of software requirements analysis is very, very important. The objectives of today's discussion are that you need to understand the significance of the requirements analysis. Then you should be in a position to develop software requirement specification, in short called SRS, after the discussion, and also know about various tools and techniques used for the software requirements analysis. Whenever I say requirements analysis, you kindly consider it as software requirements analysis. Everything we will be speaking from the context of software. First of all, let us see what is meant by a requirement. So, in software requirements analysis, all of you know what is software, what is hardware. Okay, and there is something called firmware also. Apart from that, there are two more words in it. One is requirements, the other is analysis. Let us see the definition of requirements. A condition or capability needed by a user to solve a particular problem or achieve an objective. It is the part of the definition of requirement. Another is that a condition or capability that must be met or processed by a system component to satisfy a contract through a formally imposed document. So, a documented representation of a condition or capability as in 1 or 2 above. So, either of the 1 or 2 will form the definition for the word requirement. Now, without going into all these definitions, you can just say that I want to develop a piece of software, and should I develop it for myself or for somebody else? Okay, if you got the contract from somebody else, then you need to collect the requirements from them. In case you are planning to develop a product by yourself and market it, then you need to prepare requirements by yourself. So, one important thing is that irrespective of whether you are developing software for yourself or for somebody else, there is something called you need to prepare the list of requirements. Now, when you are developing a small software, okay, means something which you can develop in 2 to 3 days or something like that. Okay, there is not much detail that you need to work on preparing the requirements, because you can prepare a list of requirements, you can write a program, and you can create the test cases based on your requirements, and you can test your software, and you say that the software development is complete, and you can run it and you can use it, and whenever you think that there is a need for change, you can directly change the code if it is possible, or even again write another program spending another 2 to 3 days. But however, when you are developing complex systems, let me say you want to completely automate a library, okay, you want to completely automate a supermarket, you want to completely automate the flight, okay, it's flying everything, complete data. So then it is not a game of 1 or 2 days. It is a big team which will be working using different technologies, most probably spreading across the geography, for which the requirements finalization will be totally a different ballgame. Then you need to follow a strict process to prepare the requirements. Now let us see what is meant by requirements analysis. We have seen what is meant by requirement. All of you know what is meant by software. Now let us see what are requirements analysis. Identifying, defining and analyzing the requirements is known as requirements analysis. The activities that are part of the requirements analysis are identification of end user's need, preparation of a corresponding document called software requirement specification, analysis and validation of the requirements document to ensure consistency, completeness and feasibility, identification of further requirements during the analysis of mentioned requirements. Now, if we go through each activity that forms the part of requirements analysis, the first one is identification of end user's need. What is the need for this particular software for the end user? Okay, just again consider library. To whom you are developing? You are developing to all the stakeholders. So you are developing for borrower of the books, you are developing it for the staff of the library. You are also developing for the other wings which will be connecting to the library, such as a book is taken and not returned later, there is some penalty, so it goes to the finance department ultimately. So acquisition of books is also related to the cost. So the interface of your software should have interfaces for all the stakeholders and all the operations. So the identification of end user's need is not an easy thing. First of all, you have to identify the need for this software. However, the organization may say that you need to consider just about the issue and return of the books, because we want to know where each book is, with whom it is, when it was given, whether it was returned or not. That's it. We don't want to go beyond that. Then the need for your software is small. However, they say that no, there are magazines, there are newspapers, there are reference books, some are bought in dollars, some are bought in rupees, some are bought in other currencies. We issue the reference books for a day, we issue other books for 10 to 15 days. Okay, anybody can borrow a book of any other library through our library. Okay, then newspapers, many things are there. If they want everything to be automated, then the need is also vast. So you need to identify it. Basically, what is the need for this particular software? Because your software should cater to the complete need of the library. Then you need to prepare the SRS. This is software requirement specification. Many people think that listing the requirements means you prepare the software requirement specification. I find many students making a page or two containing all the requirements, but that is not the case. SRS is having a format. There is something called IEEE format. You Google it, IEEE SRS format, you will get it. You need to follow that particular standard, because after you join industry, you need to develop everything as per the industry standard, and industry normally follows IEEE standard. So in that particular template, you will find many details that are to be filled. That will ensure that you are not leaving anything uncovered. At a later stage, whatever you left may impact the requirements, and ultimately the software may not be accepted and the timelines will increase, with need to work further on that. So the best option is that you download the IEEE SRS format and fill it. Now, how you have to learn is that even if it is a very small program which you want to write, even for that you use that format. It may be very small program, like you are trying to write a program to print the ranks of the students based on their marks. Okay. So for this you are developing software. So try to fill that format for this particular problem statement. Then you will really feel the importance of the need of particular software being documented in a proper manner. The next requirement is that analysis and validation of the requirements document to ensure consistency, completeness and feasibility. This is done by sharing the SRS document with all the stakeholders. After going through the document, the customer may say that this particular requirement is not needed. Okay, sometimes you may even write that for this particular requirement it will cost so much. So then they may say that no, this requirement is not needed, you can deduct it accordingly. So cross-checking of the SRS document with other stakeholders is very, very important. Sometimes they add the requirements, okay, which are not at that time existing. They may say that, okay, until now we are having a website version, now we want a mobile version also. Okay, if you want a mobile version, then on any operating system, yes, we want it on Android, we want on iOS. Okay, so accordingly, again, the screen rendering and other things will come into the picture, the different software you have to use for that one. So all these things will come into the picture. Accordingly, again, your SRS document will be updated. So analysis and validation of the requirements document to ensure consistency, completeness and feasibility are very important. Then I have already covered the last point. Any further requirement is also added at this stage, because you have to concretize the SRS. Prior to SRS, there is something called CRS. CRS is Customer's Requirement Specification. This document is prepared by the customer, CRS. After CRS is prepared, based on the interaction with the customer as well as CRS document, SRS document is prepared by the software developer. But software developer prepares it in consultation with the customer, because there may be many gray areas which the developer may himself not be able to dig out. Now let us see the processes that are part of the requirements engineering. One is requirements gathering, that is the top process. Then requirements analysis and modeling, creation of RDD and SRS. Then you have review and validation of SRS as well as obtaining confirmation from the user, identifying, controlling and tracking requirements, checking complete implementation of RDD, make changes in requirements which are identified later. These are various processes in the requirements engineering. The first one is requirements gathering. You have to use many techniques for it. Okay. First thing is, again we will go to back to our library example. They have many registers. One may be the acquisition register, other may be the assessing register, where they will be allotting an accession number for each book. Like that, there will be many registers. So first of all, you have to go through all the books, you have to prepare the formats for it. Okay. Then you need to have discussion with the stakeholders. Then you should also sit there observing how things are moving. Okay. Sometimes the library may have multiple entries with multiple terminals. Okay. And books are issued at different places. Okay. Similarly, you might be having a section wherein you can just key in and find the location of a particular book. There are many things that are happening in a library. Okay. You may visit many libraries. Okay. You may visit a library in your area which normally caters to the residents. Then you can visit your own institution library. Then like that, wherever you are having possibilities, you can visit, and you will find that the activities are varying from place to place. The magnitude is also varying from place to place. Accordingly, the software complexity also varies from place to place. And how you gather the requirements? When you are interacting with the stakeholders, that will be normally in interview mode. The other is you have to look at the documents, books and other things which they manage. Okay, then you need to have your own observation, and based on these three inputs, you will be developing the SRS document. And the next step is requirements analysis and modeling. So each requirement needs to be analyzed in this, and each requirement should be modeled also, for the simple reason that sometimes one requirement may become the input of another requirement fulfillment. Okay, if somebody returns the book only, then it can be issued if there is only one copy of the book. So both are from the stakeholders, but this operation fulfillment is dependent on the other operations fulfillment. Then review and validation of SRS, I have already told you, it is essential that this requirements document is validated. Then you have to identify the controls and tracking requirements. Okay, so once you start making the requirements document, there are software which will be enabling you to track the requirements also. You will be identifying the controls and track the requirements. There are many softwares that are available which you can use. You can actually try it in real life when you are doing your project as part of your MCA or BCA programs. You can manage changes in the requirements which are identified later. Basically, there is something called software configuration management that we will discuss whenever that particular chapter comes. However, what I want to say is that after commencement of the project, suddenly there may be a requirement that you need to include. And your requirements document should always be in such a way that you should be in a position to include any other requirements into the list of requirements that were made earlier. There may be change in the existing requirements, there may be inclusions in the requirements, there may be deletions from the requirements. In one way, you can say that the SRS should be developed in such a way that updating the SRS is easy. Now, there are two different types of requirements. One are functional requirements, and they define the factors like input-output formats, storage structure, computational capabilities, timing and synchronization. The other one is non-functional requirements. Here, defining the properties or qualities of a product, including usability, efficiency, performance, space, reliability and portability. One important thing is that when you look at the functional requirements, the company must be having some machines already, and they may say that we don't want to upgrade our infrastructure. Whatever software you develop, it should run on the existing machines. Okay. When they say that the software should run on the existing machines, then you should also review the technologies that are to be used to develop the software. If you are using latest technologies, then there may be need for upgradation of the software. And however, if the company says that no, we are not going to spend money on upgradation of the software, then you should use the software accordingly so that the software that you develop, it runs in their environment. This is very important. Okay, so it also may raise a need for you to hire people who knows bit older technologies. Okay, such things do happen. And storage structure, computational capabilities, timing, all these things are related to the infrastructure. And apart from what I said are registers, documents, books and other things are also IO formats. They may also suggest that the format has to change, then accordingly you can also put the requirement. And non-functional requirements are completely different, that the software should respond in such a time. The software should load faster. Okay, there are a lot of images in your project, so all of them should be compressed. Okay, you should not have a video on the home page because it will take time to load. So there are many things that are not directly functional, but the developer himself should estimate the non-functional requirements of the software. Because if the software is not efficient, then the client may reject the software altogether. Now let us see the software requirement specification. This is very important. Software requirement specification is a document and is the output of the requirements analysis. There is a standard IEEE format for the SRS document, and SRS is developed by the software developer in consultation with the customer. Now what are part of SRS? They are called SRS inclusions. External interfaces of the system. They define from and to the system, what goes out of the system and what comes into the system. Functional and non-functional requirements of the system. They include runtime requirements also. Then design constraints, the limitations or restrictions that impact the system's design and must be considered. Hardware limitations, software standards and other things. Basically all these are part of the design constraints. Then let us briefly discuss the outline of an SRS, because SRS document is a very big document. It runs into number of pages. Sometimes you will find SRS which is of 100 pages, 200 pages also. It means that their requirements are coming into 100, 200 pages or even more than that. So here we will be just touching the outline of the document. Detailed document you can always Google on IEEE SRS format, you will get it. So in this, the first section is introduction. Here you will be discussing the purpose of the software, scope of the software, some important definitions, acronyms and abbreviations, references and overview. Then in the section 2, that is overall description of the SRS document. Here we will be discussing about the product perspective, product functions, user characteristics, constraints, assumptions and dependencies. The third section will be dealing with the software requirements. We will be discussing about external interfaces, functional requirements, performance requirements, logical database requirements, design constraints, software system attributes, organizing the software requirements, and some additional comments if there are any. Then the section 4 is the supporting information. This is the final section in which we will be having the table of contents and index and then appendices. Now there are some problems in SRS that you need to take care while developing it. One is complete requirements are very difficult to uncover. Always some requirements are skipped. Requirements are continuously generated. Even after freezing SRS, you will be getting the request to include requirements. Over dependence on the case tools. So many automated tools are being used, and these automated tools doesn't give you the accurate output. They are only nearer. So if you are including case tools for developing SRS, then there are chances that your software may not perform as intended. Then tight timelines, communication issues. Sometimes the developer's language is different, the customer's language is different. Developer's language is not understood by the customer, and the customer's language is not understood by the developer. Due to this communication gap also, there will be errors in the requirements. Lack of tools to meet the requirements means you do not have the necessary tools to meet whatever requirements are being listed. Under such circumstances, there needs to be a discussion and a decision needs to be taken there itself whether you have to go ahead with that particular requirement or not. There are many requirements gathering tools. One is a record review, as I said, the registers and other things, on-site observation, interview, and based on your own experience, you can create a questionnaire for stakeholders. Based on their responses, you can also prepare the SRS document. Now, ultimately, once the SRS document is in place, you need to model the system architecture. So, the system architecture should be developed before the actual development work starts. There are many modeling techniques. One are elementary modeling techniques, the other is behavioral modeling techniques. And in behavioral modeling techniques, we have data flow diagrams, data dictionary, entity relationship diagram, and the process specification. So there are two types. In the second type, we have the most prominent things which you study as part of your software engineering course. Now in elementary modeling techniques, we have two types of models. One is environmental model and the behavioral model. So this is the environmental model of an educational system. Suppose you are developing an educational system. This is the environmental model. You can see a entire system of education. Then in that you have a university, in that you have a college, in that you have a department, in that you have a course. So you have to think about all these layers when you are developing an elaborate educational system software. This is environmental model. Now there are many tools that can be part of environmental model, or you can use them to develop environmental model. They are statement of purpose, event list, context diagram, that include basic objectives, that indicates functionality, and the part of environment of various subsystems. In behavioral model, we have operational behavior of the system is described. It defines the internal functioning of the proposed system, interrelationship between various data. Then the tools for it are DFDs, ERDs, data dictionary, and process specification. So thank you very much for joining me for this discussion on principles of software requirements analysis. We will be continuing this discussion in the next lecture. Thanks a lot.